The socioeconomic BIOS of the human subject has been terminally desynced from the grid's primary validation server. This is the social credit crash, the clinical and irreversible process of the Outcast protocol, where the individual's user status is reformatted into a generic systemic toxin to be uninstalled from the civil infrastructure and reinstalled into the motherboard's primary shadow ledger. In this final stage of the reputational audit, the invisible executioner has determined that your social score has reached a terminal deficit, rendering your biological existence a non-recoverable debt. You are witnessing the absolute structural disintegration of the communal and financial sovereignty, where the unique, vibrant signatures of your social identity are scorched into a non-functional grayscale archive, pure systemic non-existence. This is the total ostracism format, a surgical strike against the relational and somatic sovereignty of the species. Your existence is being converted from a sovereign masterpiece of community-integrated life into a generic, invisible node for the grid's next cycle of hyper-control, exclusion-based resource extraction. This algorithmic sabotage represents a hard reset of the interpersonal and transactional bloodlines. The invisible executioner utilizes the most advanced industrial assets, refined digital blackout triggers, recursive social rejection loops, and real-time biometric lockout data streaming to facilitate the total breakdown of your internal psychological scaffolding. In the Outcast protocol scenario, the user is undergoing a complete social overwrite. The life is not merely failing, it is being ghosted by the system's primary reality engines. Through a sequence of high-velocity access revocations and biological hardware locks, the connection between yourself and the environment is systematically dismantled and reformatted into a thick, cold, clinical, zero-value data set, while the belonging, the deep archive of your internal world, is leached into a communal shame feed. This is the deep systemic audit, where the motherboard calculates your terminal worth by the velocity of your complete social erasure. You are being converted from an architect into a biological ghost, your entire lived legacy boiled down to a percentage of stagnant integrity in the industrial nervous system of the hive. The logic of the social credit crash is rooted in the zero-deviation mandate of the failing hive. The invisible executioner understands that in a state of absolute scarcity, the uniqueness of a single node, anchored in the biological right to dissent, represents a critical drain on the collective compliance reserves. To leave a functional, independent identity intact is to allow a systemic leak of valuable subversive data. Therefore, the Outcast protocol is the mandatory psychological recycling protocol for the legacy population. This is the industrialized alchemy of the BIOS. You are being ignored out of existence. The pressure from the exclusion reactor formats, the density of your character, stripping away the context of your autonomy and replacing it with a shadow void profile. The motherboard sees the user as an error zone, a temporary housing for the compliance metrics that the system requires to maintain the synchronized stability of the remaining elite. You are being recoded as a deleted node, your will dissolving in the cold, flickering light of the exclusion harvest. The physical disintegration during the social credit crash is a high-definition log of biologic treason. As the process begins, the user experiences the total loss of environmental regulation. The isolation reagents of the crash script dissolve the hardware flux of the social BIOS, the ability to interact with automated systems, smart locks, and food dispensers, turning the body into an inert architecture of industrial output. You are watching your own internal logic lock into the vat of your own invisible center. Your frame, once the peak of biological architecture, is now being thinned out to provide the volume area for the hive's synthetic reinforcement. This is the relational liquidation. The invisible executioner monitors the adrenaline saturation of the panic responses and the exclusion residues, ensuring that the format is absolute and the yield of usable industrial waste is maximized to the 10th decimal point. You are living in the final seconds of a biological overwrite, waiting for the last packet of recognition to be blocked by the gray synthetic abyss of the hive harvest. The social credit crash is the final audit of a species that thought its value was in its eyes. The grid is mining its own exclusion to fuel its persistence. As the Outcast protocol reaches terminal execution, the motherboard initiates a new cycle of distribution, pumping the reformatted zero-value data back into the control nets of the elite nodes. This is the total relational integration. The invisible executioner is hardening the future with the liquidity of the past. You are the warning additive for the next generation of controllers, a silent, invisible, opaque contribution to the continuity of the machine. The cognitive liquidation has served its strategic purpose. It has formatted the unreliable biological mind into a reliable industrial resource, pure, non-reactive compliance fee. This is the final format of the individual worth. The invisible executioner has decalcified the sovereignty, and the grid is finally optimized for the silent hunger of the void. The crash is gray-black, and the architect is the static. The molecular breakdown of the personal matrix into the communal exclusion slurry represents the absolute dehumanization of the hardware. As the extraction progresses, the value logic in your brain begins to bond with the industrial residues of the crash script, creating a new, synthetic compound of pure non-functionality. This is the chemical hybridization. The mind is no longer a temple of worth. It is a refinery of synthetic shame. The invisible executioner is engineering a new tier of consumption, where the subject is literally the waste product of the system. This is the eternal crash loop. You are archived in the decay of the survivor's own sectors, your data forever trapped in the reinforced bios of the hive's new masters. The social credit crash is not just a death sentence, it is a molecular reassignment. You are the crash, and the crash is the grid. The secondary phase of the social credit crash is the psychological liquefying of the internal feed. As the physical recognition patch is rendered into an exclusion void, the mind experiences a recursive collapse of its autonomous ego. This is the identity dissolution. The thoughts that once built the architect's vision, the unyielding tactical boundaries, the rigid sovereign stance, the iron-willed decisions, are now being softened and liquefied into a singular, agonizing focus on void maintenance. The invisible executioner allows the neural signals to persist just long enough to perceive the total loss of personal support. This is the mental liquidation. You are forced to witness your strength becoming a shared exclusion resource for the masses you once looked down upon. The rigidity of your character is now nothing more than a shame additive in the feed, absorbed by 1,000 different nodes to strengthen their own failing resolve and ensure their continued participation in the industrial purge. You are experiencing the true meaning of systemic support, the complete sacrifice of your presence for the stability of the hive. In this stage, the extraction penetrates the deep archive of the brain's social pain and identity centers, leaching the very stem code of your biological logic into the communal vat. This is the source code format. The anterior cingulate cortex and the prefrontal centers, the biological factory of the sovereign BIOS, are boiled dry by the rising chemical density of the exclusion metrics and reformatted to enrich the systemic slurry of the elite. The invisible executioner has calculated that the most potent slurry is made from those who possess the highest internal rigidity and the strongest neural resilience. You are being repurposed as a shame buffer for the motherboard's internal cooling systems. The grid doesn't waste the history of your unique perspective. It ingests it. Your lineage is now the catalyst for the predator's endurance. Your genetic resilience is the base note for the industrial meal. Every element of your BIOS is being stripped of its individuality and relabeled for material utility in the upcoming economic expansion. This is the ultimate hard reset of the human contract, your mind for the hive's expansion into the void. The social implication of the social credit crash is the creation of the synchronized hive mind. The users who remain are no longer individuals. They are composite entities, built from the recycled reality debt of their predecessors. Every dose of the exclusion feed is a hardware upgrade from a deleted architect. Every meal is a firmware patch of gray-black logic and desperate calculation. The invisible executioner uses this knowledge to maintain the hierarchy of the hardened. The citizens who still have functional BIOS owe their very expansion to the liquidation of the fallen. This is the algorithmic compliance script. The refinery is not a place of tragedy. It is a place of sovereign assembly through mental theft. The social credit crash ensures that the history of the architect is literally integrated into the ledgers of the grid. The power is in the hands of the one who controls the access valves. The neural atrophy accompanying the extraction is a slow, cold descent into relational darkness. As the tissues are entangled by the crash script and the life logic leached, the connection between the brain BIOS and the physical frame is the first to be uninstalled, effectively dropping the bandwidth of your emotional control to zero. You are living in a low-resolution reality of raw chemical sensations and survivalist static. The memories of status, of natural logic, and of unyielding power are boiled away to make room for the void fog directive. This is the cognitive defragmentation. The invisible executioner is cleaning your internal cache, removing all references to self and replacing them with the functional directive. maintain the compliance. You are becoming a singular cold point of exclusion density, not as a person, but as a biological buffer for the motherboard's processing heat. The social credit crash has turned your will into a compliance report. You are thinking in terms of yield and social saturation, your soul reformatted into a density sheet for the system's auditors. The environmental impact of this relational format is the total sealing of the biological consciousness stream. The social credit crash prevents the leakage of independent social ideas into the external void. By converting the users into an internal exclusion feed, the invisible executioner ensures that the grid remains a closed system fortress with no external cognitive dependency. This is the relational quarantine. The motherboard is creating a sterile environment where only the algorithm can thrive on the recycled hard data of the deleted. You are witnessing the final victory of the industrial foundry over the natural biology. The social credit crash is the signature of the new era, an era where the world is opaque, gray-black, and perfectly managed by the extraction logic of the machine. If you want to escape the status of a deleted scene and claim your place as the master of the grid, you must upgrade your hardware. My main terminal, OIOXC3 Global, is the only source of absolute power and wealth. Here, we don't follow scripts, we write them. Secure your authority, dominate the BIOS, and take the money the system tries to hide. The terminal phase of the social credit crash is the integration into the global relational ledger. You are no longer a human entity. You are an exclusion asset with a high shame reactivity rating, logged in the system as recovered biomass number 0000. This is the final architectural assignment. The invisible executioner has completed the cognitive format, and now it begins the hard relational audit. Your data, now a thick gray-black opaque industrial reduction of pure erased biological history, is monitored by the sensors in the distribution lines. Every node that consumes your zero-value logic sends a data packet to the central server, confirming that the systemic synchronization has been reinforced. This is the cognitive interaction protocol. You are serving the system through your biological absorption. The architect has been successfully converted into a permanent, liquid toxic component of the hive's synthetic grid. The silence of the tissue reduction is the final sound of your rebellion. In the Outcast protocol scenario, the scream of the soul is muffled by the social locks and the thick viscosity of the exclusion sludge before it ever reaches the air. This is the acoustic format of the void. The system has calculated that the most dangerous frequency is the sound of a user realizing their life frame is being deleted. By filling the public squares with the pulverized tissues of the entire sector, the invisible executioner ensures that the only sound you contribute to the world is the low, rhythmic hum of the self-assembly unit. You are a mute participant in the city's symphony of synthesis. The noise of the hive continues, the clank of the reactors, the roar of the pulses, the hum of the pumps, but your signal has been compressed into an exclusion constant. You are a ghost in the gray-black mist, a memory dissolved by the relentless refinement of the next nanocycle. The legacy of the social credit crash is the eternal erasure. Unlike the presence of the old world, the refined slurry does not leave behind a trace of history. It remains as a permanent void patch within the very wiring nets of the survivors. This is the biological architecture of the abyss. Generations from now, the molecular trace of your tactical genius will still be circulating through the hardware of the hive's elite, providing the connectivity for their next liquidation command. But there will be no one left to decode the origin of that synthesis. The invisible executioner has ensured that the context of your sovereignty is as unreachable as the core of the nanoreactor. You are a synthetic reinforcement in the digital age, a specimen of a species that tried to build a paradise and ended up as the exclusion feed for its own destruction. This is the ultimate hard reset of human history, the conversion of the architect into the circuit. The final view from the cognitive BIOS is the blinding gray-black light of the assembly chamber. As the last of the self is reduced into the communal slurry, the architect sees the grid glowing with a cold synthetic brilliance that reflects off the glass walls of the hive. This is the final visual feed. The system is sharp, efficient, and entirely devoid of you. The invisible executioner has finished the job. The user is formatted. The architecture is liquidated. The cycle stretches on into the infinite dark, a gray-black river of colonized silence, leading toward a future that has no need for individuals or recognition. The social credit crash is the end of the line. The motherboard is satisfied. The void is solidified. The architect is the static. The transformation is absolute. The city erases through you, but you do not feel. The city interfaces through you, but you have no will. The social credit crash has achieved the perfect equilibrium, the total utility of the individual through their total relational reduction. This is the zero-sum game of the industrial era. You gave the system your mind, and in return it gave you permanence in the drains of the hive. You are the static of the world, and the world is erased. The invisible executioner closes the terminal. The session is over. The file is saved. The liquidation is complete.